All right. Great. Well, let's begin. So, hello, everyone. We are so fortunate to have a wonderful panel for our Libraries on the Front Lines panel today. My name is Dr. Kathryn Wiley, and I am an assistant professor in the School of Education at Howard University. And I'm delighted to be the moderator for today. So I'm just going to do some quick introductions of our panelists, and then we will launch into some questions. So again, we're really focused on libraries and what's happening with these book bans today. And so first we have Vee Vee Majesty, Latina DMV goddess, drag artist, advocate, and community builder with us today. Welcome, Vee Vee. We also have Shari Henry, who is Director of Democracy and Community Impact at Urban Libraries. Welcome, Shari. We have Mary Pellicano, former librarian and with the American Libraries Association Policy Corps. Welcome, Mary. We have Leon van der Goetz, Executive Director and founder of the NOVA Prism Center. Welcome, Leon. And we have Kelsey Lawrence, who is a community organizer with Virginia's Red Wine and Blue. We are glad to have Kelsey with us today as well. So I'm going to start actually by posing a question to Shari, Mary, Kelsey, and of course, anyone who would like to chime in is always welcome. So this is a banned books festival, right? And as Andrew was telling us earlier, we are seeing book bans at really a 21-year high. So help us just understand the landscape of what's happening in terms of book banning here in Virginia and across the country.
Is this on? Oh, there. So as Delegate Fillercorn said, in 2020, the American Libraries Association documented more book challenges and bans in the country than they had ever in the 21 years that they had been keeping track. They just came out with the numbers for this year. For the first 8 months of this year, it's up 20% from where it was last year. And last year was double the year it was before. So you can see exponentially this is growing. A trend that is a little interesting / alarming is that up to now it had been mostly school libraries that were the focus of these actions. Now we're seeing more and more public libraries in the crosshairs. And this is concerning for a number of reasons. But one of the tactics they're using is to try to cut funding for library systems that have books that some people deem inappropriate on their shelves. So that's a very dangerous and slippery slope, and it's a trend that we'll be watching closely.
I think I can speak to what's going on in Front Royal. We have 141 books that are being challenged right now, so we're definitely the poster child right now for public library requests for removals. We have a very organized effort in my community. They had a party where they filled out what ended up being over almost 800 requests for removals for 140 books. So they were mobilized very quickly and flooded our rural library. And then after that, decided to go above the library's head to our Board of Supervisors to ask for the library to be defunded until they removed those books. And we have wonderful, brave librarians who are fighting to keep these books on the shelves, and they have not removed a single book. It's wonderful.
Yeah. So I'll touch a little bit, a big picture national landscape, and then closer to home. Across the country, it's beyond alarming, actually. There is a state that has criminalized librarians who put certain books on shelves. There are about 11, a few who have disassociated the state libraries because of the elected officials have demanded that they disassociate from the American Library Association, and about 11 in the queue to do so. which means that those state libraries won't be able to purchase and supply all the great funding that American Library Association provides. They may have restrictions on being able to go to conferences. So for them to start to legislate against association is also something that's against, obviously, what we believe as Americans who treasure the First Amendment. As far as Virginia goes, I think really, to me, it started in 2015 with what you all can Google this. It was called, we referred to it as the Beloved Bill. It was a Fairfax County mom. Sometimes when those of us who grew up in Fairfax, we think that we're the ones saving the rest of the state, and sometimes it's us. So it was a Fairfax County mom who put forth a bill because her son was very offended by Toni Morrison's Beloved, which, by the way, he was reading in 12th grade AP English. So that was a complete choice to be in that class. That bill stuck around. Several of us fought it and were able to follow up with the governor at the time, who vetoed it. It did not have enough votes to override the veto. I knew the minute I saw that mom on Twitter, I can tell you where I was, just like I can tell you where I was when the Challenger exploded. You know, those moments in your life. I saw her on Twitter several weeks before the election where our current executive was put into power. And I thought, well, here we go again. And I knew really without a lot of work, he would, if it passed, sign the bill, which has now happened. It's slightly different, but it's called SB 656. You all can look it up and see the havoc it's wreaking on our school teachers and school librarians.
Thank you for that, Shari. And really, I think, you mentioning Beloved, we would love to hear about examples of the kinds of books, which books and which stories are being targeted by these bans here. So maybe, Leon, if you have some ideas around that, and others as well.
Yeah, so today I brought a few of the graphic novels that have been challenged across the U.S. To start with, a children's board book about a kid who has two moms and does normal childhood things with their moms has been banned in a county in Florida for being indecent, pornographic, or obscene. Genderqueer was one of the early challenges at the Fairfax County School Board meeting in late 2021, early 2022, for a single frame that mentioned the concept of masturbation. It was not graphically illustrated, and it was the author's own story about coming to terms with their own gender identity. And then The Girl from the Sea, which is banned in a county in Florida because, and this is a direct quote from one of the legislators advocating for the ban, girls don't go to school to learn how to become better lesbians. That's it. That's the reason.
Thank you for those examples, Leon. Yeah, are there others?
Genderqueer is the #1 banned book, according to the American Library Association, in the country. So that gets a lot of press.
It does.
So with the organized effort in my town, they published a list. They made it really easy for us to decide to look and see why they wanted these books removed. And the only thing we can find that is common on those 140 books is that they have LGBTQ characters, content, or are suspected to have LGBTQ characters in them. One of the ones on our list is Aaron Slater, Illustrator. It's a beautiful book about a boy who wants to become an illustrator. He's an artist, and on the picture, I had to Google it after I read it, of course, because it seems so, it's a beautiful book. It's a children's book. I had to Google to see why it would be on a banned list, and then apparently he has two moms. But it wasn't even obvious to the average reader. It wasn't obvious to me as an adult who was looking for it. It wouldn't be obvious to a child either. These are how families exist. This is our world. And I think it speaks to a larger effort to remove more than just books, more than just experiences from our communities and our societies as a whole.
And I mean, to me, as a very visibly queer person, to me it's really frustrating, right? Because it's very extremely evident exactly what they're trying to do, right? Because all throughout history, when moments of political upheaval or whatever it may be, they always come for the marginalized folk. You know what I mean? The people of color, the queer people. So that kind of censorship is definitely like right on. That's why I do what I do, and I do it so like unapologetically, right? Because it's like, you know, the world needs color. You're not gonna take the color away from our books. You're not gonna take a color away from our people. But yeah, it's really frustrating. It really is. It's a frustrating experience to see exactly what they're doing, because they can't really give any good reasons. You know what I mean? It's all very kind of transparent to me and kind of frustrating to live through. But again, that's why I do what I do, because it's like we have to keep fighting that good fight, you know?
We do. The world needs you. It does.
Vee Vee, I'm so glad you brought that up, and I'm wondering if you can, you know, we know that that drag storytellers and story hours in particular have been targeted. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the landscape, what you're seeing, and how it's impacting your work?
Right. Well, it's kind of become a little bit like, you know, it started a couple of years ago, but kind of like hatred and fear have now gone a bigger platform, right? And it kind of, again, it's kind of frustrating to me as somebody who does drag, because I love the history of it. I love, you know, everything that comes with the community, with the acceptance of being your authentic true self, right? There's such a rich history of people who have fought and long and hard. For me, like, as a gay man, I am able to express myself more fluidly and more unapologetically because of, you know, my ancestors, right? So for me, it's frustrating to kind of see kind of history being brought back and us having to fight again. You know what I mean? Because this is where it all begins, right? Because when it comes to anything relating to being queer, whether it's sexuality or gender, that's kind of the most like misunderstood. You know, people don't know too much about it, and that's why, like I said, in moments that kind of we're living through right now, they tend to go for the marginalized, the people of color, the queer people, because it's the people that, you know, it's ignorance breeds fear, and that kind of fear is what's kind of we're pushing back against, you know, and that's what I'm kind of been seeing out and about. You know, I've been fortunate enough for like none of my drag stories to be protested and, you know, everything that's happening, but it's definitely a very scary climate up there, because like for a couple of years, like, yeah, like fear and hatred and like ignorance have been given a platform because of certain political, you know, movements, and it's been a little bit tricky. But again, that's what drives me to just be even more unapologetic about what I do, because it's like, you know, I really have been especially upset with the narrative that, like, you know, with drag story hours, we're trying to prime kids, we're trying to indoctrinate kids to be gay. No, we're trying to give people the opportunity to see all walks of life. And as they grow into who they are, it becomes an easier journey to accept being who you are, right? Because for me, like growing up, I wish I had like somebody like myself to look to tell me it was okay to eventually be this, right? Because it's gonna happen. We're gonna have queer kids, we're gonna have trans kids, we're gonna have gay kids, we're gonna have all different sorts of kids, right? What kind of message are these, you know, these people in power, the people that are supposed to be, that are sworn to protect its people, right? What kind of message are they sending out to these kids who may have some sort of queerness inside of them, but they're being told you can't read this book about your potential experience, right? Like that kind of, it can kind of mess with you a little bit in, you know, the developmental process. So it's like, and again, that's why I'm so unapologetic about what I do, because it's like I needed somebody like myself telling me it was okay, not to make me gay, because I was gay since I came out my mother. that is something that I know to my heart, but it would have made my journey through life so much easier if I had, you know, somebody just even by existing, letting me know that it was okay to exist as I was. You know, I was never, yeah.
Love that. Well, Leon, why don't you tell us a little bit about your organization and how it responds to these kinds of issues that come up?
So I run NOVA Prism Center, which is a library and community center focused on the Northern Virginia LGBTQIA community. And we started the organization specifically in response to the challenges in Fairfax County. As part of my own personal story, I had been teaching English in Japan and was a couple months from boarding the plane, planning to come back and start the process of becoming a public school teacher. But seeing books about people like me, trans people, people who are gender nonconforming, people who are LGBTQ being challenged, I didn't feel safe as a new teacher in the public school system, I felt like I was going to be a liability. So in response to the challenges, I said, enough of that. I'm going to start a library that doesn't care about challenges because we are community funded. We can just ignore them because the people who are going to be taking those books off the shelves aren't part of our community. So we started the library. We've been going for about 1.5 years. We've been incredibly successful in that time. We've opened up a space. We will be able to start lending books out this November. And part of our journey has also been watching the challenges and seeing these lists come out. There's the list that was recommended for challenge at Samuel's. There's a list of 850 books that were recommended for challenge in Texas. And we take those lists and we say, hey, you did my work for me. Now I know all the good gay books. And now I can go get them. But part of that is also we do pop-ups. And as part of our pop-ups, when people start challenging things, and if the library starts taking books off the shelf, we'll go there and we'll find a space to host us in a pop-up, and we will take the books to that community to let people know that they can take them out of the public library, they can take them out of the schools, but they will not take them from the people.
So some of you might be wondering a little bit about the process of how these book bans are working. And so I'm wondering, Shari and Mary, can you talk to us a little bit about inside of schools, what really is the process for challenging books, and what do libraries do when a book is challenged? How are these things handled? Just so we all have a sense of kind of what's going on behind the curtain.
In the public school system, there's a request for reconsideration form that anybody can fill out, not only for library books, but for a textbook or anything that's being used in the classroom or with their student. It's important that the person who fill out this form be a person of standing that has a student, a child in the public school. And usually, as a librarian, I was a librarian for 15 years in Loudoun County, next door. We would get, one every couple of years for a parent who saw their child reading a book that looked a little like maybe not appropriate for them. Fine. Here's the form, fill it out. First you have to read the book, then you have to, which usually stops them right there because they have to fill out the book, they have to do a little book report, they have to be very specific. But this is, what we're seeing now is very different. These are people who are coming in with lists of hundreds of books sometimes, with these requests for reconsideration forms filled out with form letters style from some of these organizations that are behind this. We found a Washington Post did a story the other day that identified 11 people were responsible for 60% of the book challenges in the country. So you can see that this is a very targeted, concerted effort. It's not, mom concerned that little Susie might be in over her head. It's a concerted, political, organized effort, and the people who are the parents, unfortunately, in my opinion, they're the pawns. They don't. There's a woman in Spotsylvania her mission is to get every sexually explicit book out of every school library in Spotsylvania, and she challenges 5 to 10 books a week. They used to get one challenge every 5 years, and now these people are on these crusades. So it's a very different landscape than it has been. They have the same process in public libraries as well.
It's very similar,
yeah.
yes. And I would say, just to be clear, there's not a single book in those libraries that meets the state code for what sexually explicit is. So that term's being used a lot and it's being weaponized, but these books don't meet that legal definition. So that's just something to keep in mind when you hear that term. So in public libraries, I oversaw collections and cataloging for Arlington County, and then I was director of Roanoke County for several years. There is a very similar process, And I'll tell you, we take those very seriously because we catch things. It takes a lot of eyes to keep our collections fresh and make sure that they are meeting the needs of the community. And so I was always grateful, and I talked to staff and I said, let's not get our backs up too quickly. You know, let's really take a look at these and see if somebody has read the book and has legitimate worries about it. Let's take a look and see what we could be missing. So that should be the process. What can happen when I was library director is I one time got a pretty angry letter that someone had come in during Black History Month, and there was a display, and one of the books was by Langston Hughes, and the person said that in his letter, quoting Thomas Jefferson, which I thought carried a certain amount of I don't know, extra interest to the whole thing, that Langston Hughes did not belong in the public discourse. So I took the advice that I gave staff, and I waited and I thought about that letter, and I reread it a few times, and then I responded using, I responded using a Madison quote, and saying that, you know, I understood his concerns and that we have a lot of things that other people don't like, and so I'm really glad he came, and I'm really glad he found something that, you know, he noticed that bothers him a little, and a lot of what he likes probably bothers other people, and it was my job to make sure they were all on the shelf. So I think it's really, really important to cultivate that sort of conversation. However, today, some of these moms, yes, are 11 people putting forth all these challenges at 60%. It's kind of out of hand. What's also happening is people are going right on past the library consideration form. They're going right on past the library director. They're showing up with their speech to the county school board meeting or the city council meeting, and they're angry. And the people working in libraries are like, whoa, you know, I didn't even know that this was a thing. So we've been caught a little bit behind in all of this as kind of a collective. I think some people saw it individually. We could see the writing on the wall, I think, since 2015 or 2016, what might happen. So I think that's the important thing. So now there are groups here, Moms for Liberty, others, that we're so thankful who are partnering with library organizations, because if we don't build coalitions and figure this out, you know, we're already behind. So we have a lot of work to do.
And like, I was just gonna, well, two things. I like that you kind of said that they're kind of using them as pawns, because essentially, yeah, like all you need is like 11 people with power and influence to get something that like can kind of grab you blindsided when it's been okay for the longest, right? And then all of a sudden, oh no, now it's an issue because we decided it needs to be an issue and it needs to be something we are angry about. You know, which is like a little bit ridiculous, because it's like, well, we've had all this time, you know, it's been out there. Why now, right? Like, why now? You know, it's a really important thing we need to ask ourselves, like, why now? Where are we in history that this needs to happen right now? All these things are brought up to our attention, right? It's just something that, like, I like to keep in mind, you know, why now?
I love that. It makes me think of that quote, I think by Grace Lee Boggs, what time is it on the clock of the world? You know, where are we at right now? So I will say we have a couple more formal questions for our panelists, but as questions might be coming up for you, please do jot them down on the note cards next to you. And can our note card collectors hold up their hands just so we see? Oh, wonderful, Mary still. Okay, wonderful. Okay, well, so as we begin to address our last couple of questions, I'm wondering about, actually, Kelsey, if you can talk to us about what Red Wine and Blue is doing and how your work is connected to this issue.
Sure. So I was found by Red, Wine, and Blue and hired by them because of my work with Save Samuels. So I helped create the movement in my town of citizens, parents, people advocating for our libraries. And Red, Wine, and Blue offers resources, we offer training, we offer help for these grassroots movements to kind of get on their feet, to build a community, to work together, because the other side is working together. I don't know how, because a lot of them are really big personalities, right? But they are mobilizing their people, and we have to do the same, because it really is right now a numbers game. And we know that we're stronger together. Unfortunately, there's a lot of issues in rural towns with a lot of intimidation and things like that. And if we have more people showing up at these meetings, we feel the community, we feel empowered to speak out. and it's not so scary anymore. So Red, White, and Blue is offering those tools, the connection, the community, and it's doing very well with that. So I'm really grateful to be a part of it. I feel lucky.
Thank you, Kelsey. You mentioned rural towns, and I am wondering, I know we're up here in Northern Virginia, but help us understand what is happening in more rural parts of the state.
Okay, so I'm in Front Royal. Our population is 40,000 people. Our median income is $36,000 a year. Our library is our community center. We don't have any other place where people can meet, especially for free, where people can get books. We don't even really have a full bookstore in our community. Like this, if they remove something from the shelves, they're removing it from this entire community. So we are at stake. And in my town, we're fortunate to live next to a college, or unfortunately, I'm sorry, live next to a college. So they really do, the opposition has a lot of numbers here. And it seems to be the issue in a lot of other places too, like Spotsy, and there's Moms for Liberty. You know, they don't always have the same name, but they certainly have the same purpose. And yeah.
Mary and Shari, do you have things to add on sort of what's happening in the rest of the state that would help us up here to know about?
Well, I just got back from the Association of Small and Rural Libraries Conference in Wichita. I'd never been to Wichita before. Oh, did it go off? Can you hear me now? Okay, sorry. I don't know what happened. I just returned from the Association of Small and Rural and Small Libraries Conference in Wichita. So what I see nationally is what I see in Virginia is like Kelsey said, it's a numbers game, and people in these small communities, they don't have the same resources. And America has a long-standing history of urban centers being more progressive and rural areas being more conservative and more traditional. And so those are rich parts of our history that we don't want to see go away. So I think it's really important to support these smaller rural communities with what are traditional values, that families can come together and make choices for their own, but the same choice you want your family to make, I want to be able to make for mine. So I think that those sorts of values have been turned on their heads, it's what's good for me but not for thee. I want to do it for myself, and I don't want you to have the same freedom. Seems to be happening in larger numbers in smaller communities where it can be, if there's 11 people nationally, imagine how it might take one or two in a tiny little community to stir people up and get a lot of attention.
And the rural libraries are more susceptible to that funding cuts from their counties, which is a real concern.
So when we think about the fact that we look at the numbers on the books bans, the kinds of books being banned, the kinds of authors whose works are being banned, being from the LGBTQ plus community, being authors of color, and about stories about those of the LGBT community and those of color, are there certain kinds of efforts and advocacy that groups who are not facing that hostility should be really focused on right now to support?
The sort of thing you're doing right here is exactly what needs to be done. Building coalitions, finding partners, understanding what Vee Vee said so beautifully before. It's really not about the book. It's about the representation in the book. And, you know, I'll talk to, because I'm a little bit of a warrior, I'll start talking to people about book bans, and they know I'm a librarian, their eyes start to glass over. But what they don't realize is that, you know, books are mirrors, books are windows. People they deserve to be seen, and others deserve to see them, and that's how we build empathy, that's how we build compassion, that's how we build an inclusive society. So the book itself is paper and ink. It's what's inside, it's the representation, and finding collaborative partnerships whose membership will be impacted by these challenges and bans. Those are the voices that need to be heard.
And I just wanted to add to that, you know, it's, although this is a very, like, you know, they're starting to ban books, and, you know, they are mostly focused towards, like, people of color author or people of color and like LGBT. But the thing is, like, that's kind of how it ends up working, right? They start down from this, like, the more marginalized, and then it's a very slippery slope. And it's like, that's why when we start to see signs of it, this is like a huge sign, that's why we're here together today, because of it all happening. But that's when we need to really like unite and push back against all that, because it's like, this is like a starting point. It starts to like, they start to chip away, and like historically, that's how it's funny, because like it's in books, right? Like Fahrenheit 451, like it literally kind of outlines
That's
what would
banned
happen.
too.
Yeah. No, it's like, it literally, and that's the whole point behind banning them, right? Because if we don't have anything to refer to history-wise, we're bound to make the same mistakes. But what if making those same mistakes is done on purpose, right? What if we don't want people to know what happened, so there's a chance that it can resurface, right? But yeah, I mean, it's important to just like start to unite and start having these really important conversations very early on, because although maybe your community isn't affected just yet, it will get there. It begins exactly. So.
And if I can speak to what you as a person can do to be a better ally, especially on this topic, it's read the books. Read them. And then if they make you uncomfortable, sit with that. Ask yourself why. Why does this make me uncomfortable? Why do I feel like people shouldn't read this? And then share them. Lift them up. Give them to your friends. Loan them out. Tell your friends to read them. And because more often than not, the thing that makes people uncomfortable is unfamiliarity. It's an aspect of someone else's life that they've never experienced and can't quite fathom how someone else could experience that. But every single one of those experiences is real. Someone has lived through that. And so the only way to combat that is to understand it and accept it. And even if you don't really get it, know that that is someone's story. And then share it and lift it and use your voice to elevate the voices that cannot elevate themselves. That is the only way to truly be an ally, is to remember that ally is a verb.
I think Leon's so right to point that out, and that proximity and community is the antidote to this, as far as on a very base level. There's a lot of work to be done, but becoming familiar with what these books say and why you're uncomfortable. And also, I happen to be lucky enough, before Representative Raskin was pulled into his vote, to be on the Hill with him the other day when he announced his resolution against book banning. It was a beautiful day. It was like a dream of mine to be back there. I love those field trips as a kid. And he said, if you don't like a book, don't read it, or read it and discuss it with people, discuss why you don't like it, and have good old-fashioned heated debates. Write a review saying why you don't like it. Like, there's a million things to do other than asking for a book to be banned. So I like to say the freedom to read is as American as apple pie. It is just awesome. And so we really need to understand that. And I also think reading's a civil right. And I think you're going to hear that more and more. It is your civil right to be able to go into a library and find books that represent you, that are what you want to read. And so really kind of clarifying your values and standing firm in those things right now is absolutely critical.
And I do want to agree with that. One of NOVA Prism Center's top values, like number one on our values, is knowledge is a fundamental human right. Period, bar none.
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
Knowledge is a fundamental human right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have some strategy questions to get the panel, get your thoughts on, okay? So what can we do to support a book? So if we find out, first of all, is there a way to know what's being challenged? And if we feel like we're in support of that book, what should we do to make sure that our voices are heard?
There's an organization called Unite Against Book Bans. Everybody should log on and join. You can sign up for action alerts, and they will send you notifications of something coming up, a challenge, an opportunity to write to your legislator, write to the editor of your newspaper. This is Banned Book Week, so this is a perfect opportunity to speak out. They have graphics that you can amplify the message on your social media accounts. Talk to your friends and neighbors, like we've talked about, your groups, your HOA, your church, your book club. Just spread the word and amplify this message that, reading it's actually not just a civil right, it's the first one. It's our right to read and learn and speak. So those are things that you can do right away.
I think on top of a great compliment to Unite Against Book Bans, which I love their alerts, and I've been a member of ALA for a very long time, is also there's a group called Every Library, and they have a political action arm, and you can sign up. You can Google this because I don't have a PowerPoint with the exact length, but it's called Fight for the First. And you will get petition after petition after petition, but you'll see kind of what's going on around the country. And if you sign one of those, you'll be on their mailing list, and they'll keep you updated on what's going on as well.
And
Sorry, I also think some of these fights are so localized that it's really important that we show up at school board meetings and that we show up at board of supervisor meetings and library board of trustee meetings. And they have public comment at these, they have agendas online. So because some of them they're just so specific to the area, and then the strategy has to kind of fit around those challenges.
I think there definitely needs to be like raising awareness of it almost, because like just the people that are kind of showing up, I have this idea for the most part that people are well intentioned, right? They're probably there because they don't want their children to, it's probably well intentioned, but there's a lot of them against people that just don't know what's happening or just take the books for granted. So it's like definitely raising awareness just to get like that opposing force, and like you said, to those school boards would definitely be really helpful, because either you really aren't too aware about it or you take the books for granted, but there needs to be a pushback to people that, some people like might just be doing it, for whatever reason, but like when it comes to children especially, I notice that they do that a lot. Think of the children, so I'm sure like there's some aspect that's well intentioned in that, but there definitely needs to be a raise in awareness to push back against that like fear-based thinking, because that's really what it is. It's just like, think of the children, but we are. Right, exactly, we are.
I agree, and I think it's so much simpler than we think it is. Save Samuels was born out of a conversation between me and my book club friends, and someone said, you should make a Facebook event, and I was like, oh, I can do that. That's not hard. Never having made a Facebook event before. And then all of a sudden, months later, I'm leading a grassroots movement. We all have matching T-shirts. And it's an incredible experience. I've met people that I cannot believe I've been living my life without. The community is everything. And it's not, you learn, you grow, you become empowered. It's not as hard as you think it is to start this. The obstacle is just to start it.
And thinking about what you said, and also Vee Vee, you mentioned fear, and I'm thinking about some of the questions coming in are, how do we counter this sort of conservative fear-based movement that is happening broadly right now? Is there, you're mentioning community, and I just feel like the love that you have for what you've been able to create, and I'm wondering about our ideas about how to really get at what is so much a fear tactic.
Well, I mean, for me, it's just like drag in itself is a political statement, you know what I mean? To show up and completely just be like gender bending, to not really conform to like something like gender is just, for me, that's like just being visible, and like being heard, being, my experiences are my experiences. And I love drag, I love the history, I love what I do. Right now I'm talking as myself, but I have this like big, greater than life personality, right? And I use that as a platform because like outside of drag, I'm a Latino immigrant, right? And it's just like, as that, I kind of face challenges already as somebody that is like marginalized as it is, but I use Vee Vee to raise my voice, and this is my platform, So I mean, just like for me, from my point of view, somebody that some way to fight that is just using my voice, using my platform, and just having people that are willing to listen, and like not even like accept it, but but just accept me as I am. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of the main part of what's going, because this is all for me like a symptom of something greater. There's been it's been kind of like spiraling the last couple of years, all these like fear-based attacks on people of color, on trans people, on drag queens and stuff like that. So for me, it's just continuing to fight the good fight, raise awareness, tell your neighbor like, hey, this is happening, because it's been spiraling. And it's a little jarring, because we're living in very interesting times. And like I said earlier, why now, right? Well, why now? It's been happening for years now, but now it's starting to like slowly pick up some steam, right? And for me, it's just like I think you said it, like books breed empathy, they bring compassion, and that's kind of how we cure the symptom of that greater fear, like just having that compassion for one another, leading through our humanity and our authenticity, right? Regardless of anything, because like I'm sitting in front of you guys in a cotton candy, pink wig and stuff, but there's still humanity within me that deserves to be accepted and loved just the same as anybody else, and I think everybody has that right. I think it's a human, it's a natural law to just be, and just exist. So
I think the challenge is, for a lot of us maybe in this room, is to see the people who are opposition and their humanity. That's a challenge for me. I'm just going to put it out there. So I will tell you, our number one webinar record setting was when we advertised a webinar a couple months ago at Urban Libraries Council called Civil Discourse in Uncivil Times, or Civic, anyway, you can look it up. I'm going to mess that up right here with this mic. But anyway, Civic Discourse in Uncivil Times. And so I think it's really hard. It's really hard, and I think it's a both and. I think we have to rise to that and really remember that, see people in their humanity, to think in terms of when they say but the children, right. Say me too. Me too. I really care about children. I really care about families. And find the common ground, and that's one level to really build on that. And then there's also the both and. We're not going to win this academically. We're not going to win it with reason. We should be reasonable. We should research and know our history and know what we're doing and I've written an academic paper almost on this. So certainly a leadership brief and a lot of other things. So it's not that that's not important. We're not going to win it on that. This battle's being won on a very visceral level. So Moms Against Greg Abbott did a great job in Texas, in my view, of coming up with a sign. You can look up Texas history, and my husband was a Texan, and there's this cannon on this side, years ago, 1860s, I think, a cannon with a Texas star, and it says, "Come and take it." And it was a war between people in Mexico and Texans, and it was come and take it, like come and take the cannon. So what Moms Against Greg Abbott did was they put up they made a sign, and appears to be a child, but a person laying in the grass with a book, and it says, "Come and take it." Same Texas star. What are messages we can have that are, they're not Moms for Liberty, they're Moms Against Liberty. And now they have a program called Moms for Libraries. They're not for libraries, they're against libraries. So how do we take our language back, but also find words that resonate at a visceral level while we're also making sure we see people in all of their humanity?
And I want to add on to that. I forget the exact statistic, but I was reading somewhere that a single sit-down conversation with a single trans person can de-radicalize a significant number of anti-trans people, because it's just that connection that suddenly breaks through and teaches people that we're human.
That's why they want to ban it, right?
Yeah.
And
that's why.
That's all it takes. You
That-
know what I mean?
It really is just that.
It's because we, our animal instincts, we want to be connected to each other. We want to be, in community. We want to be people like us. a lot of these differences are very two-dimensional. They're very shallow, whether it's skin color, whether it's sexuality. You know, there's such a weird like obsession with like gender and like, what's that person? Oh, what's, you know what I mean? But it's like, it doesn't matter. It's a person. It's a human. They bleed the same. You know, they cry the same. And that's kind of what we're missing right now, I feel like. And that's why I feel like this fear has spiraled out of control, because we forget all these differences that make us different don't make us so different, like at all. They're very surface level. They're very, you know, two-dimensional. I think we need to go back to like our very basics of our humanity. You know, we cry, we bleed, we laugh the same. We're all, you know, we're all on this rock trying our best to just like, you know.
And I think it's easy to hate and demonize an idea, but it's very different when that idea is flesh and blood in front of you. So getting out there, speaking, you know, making yourself known and seen, and trying to help, you know, the other side develop some empathy and some compassion too.
So perhaps those of us in the audience, we can be having conversations as well to help make those connections with our neighbors and those in our circles of influence. So, well, I know we are almost at time, and is it okay if our audience members maybe chat with you afterwards and about your work, about your organizations, everything like that? Yes? All right, well, let's hear it for our panelists today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.